Hey everybody, it's rhinociart, and sorry about the video coming in a little bit late, but it's been really hot in Halifax and I do not have the motivation to sit indoors in nearly 40-degree weather. So today I thought I'd give you guys a few tips and tricks on how to do ink work, since that's something that I've recently picked up and have learned a whole bunch of things about this year. But we're going to be using tools that you have already around your house, because ain't nobody got money or time to be spending on art supplies. And on that note, there's lots of different paper that people use for art, all these fancy heavyweight bloody blahs. We're going to use this piece of scrap paper that I found that's basically computer paper but kind of a little bit bigger. As far as tools for sketching, we've got ye olde mechanical pencil that I'm pretty sure came from the dollar store, and then a basic ass eraser that came from Staples. There are a lot of different pens out there that people will use for inking. I've got kind of a water-based one here. We got some archival ink, which are my usual go-to. But you know what we're doing today? A ballpoint pen. And then an optional white gel pen for highlights. And boys, that is the bare basics of what you need for inking. So I'm gonna begin by doing a sketch of, I don't know, just a pretty girl. A lot of people will sketch quite heavy, quite dark with their pen, so I tend to lean on the extremely light side, to the point where sometimes I'm sketching, people are like, how can you even see what you're drawing? Keep in mind though, if you are somebody who tends to sketch a little bit heavier, you're probably going to want to kind of erase your lines before you begin your line art. Otherwise you're going to be scrubbing so hard on the page that you're going to really fade the ink, and then you're going to have to go over it again. I mean, I go over my inks again anyway, but yeah, personal preference. If you only want to do it once, go easy on your pencil. Couple of things to note when you are choosing your pens. If you've got some options and you're like, hey, I want to splurge a little bit, or you've got some various pens to play with, check how long the pen takes to dry. You don't want to draw something and then erase it and then smudge it everywhere. Trust me on this, even if you gotta wait a good 20-30 minutes, make sure your ink is bone dry before you take an eraser to any of it. You also may want to check if your pen is waterproof. So something like that water-based pen that I have, if you apply water to it, say if you're doing watercolors over something you've just inked, it's going to smudge everywhere. The archival ink that I normally use, and it turns out the ballpoint, are actually pretty good with water, so you could probably use either of these if you wanted to use watercolors or things after you've done your inking. Again, personal preference, the water-based inks aren't bad, but if you're going to be applying water, don't use them. So I've mentioned this a lot in my other videos, but I always do a very loose inking of my sketch before I erase my pencil. And when I say it's loose, I mean for real. There's lines overlapping each other. It's kind of like a sketch on its own. Usually when I'm inking the face, I'll put a lot of attention into making sure all my lines are very clean and tidy, but the rest of it I kind of tend to just slap on, because I know it's all going to be thickened out when I go over the inks again. So first draft, don't worry about being too precise. Now I personally find, especially with the archival ink, that once I erase the pencil, the ink fades quite a bit. So if you're not too particular, you can do one layer of ink, erase all your pencil and call it a day, but I always like to go over things another time. Before I do that though, I often like to get all of my shading and coloring, whatever you would call it with ink, down. An artist friend of mine, Dippy, does hair with these sort of singular lines, usually in one or two directions, with spaces left for like where the highlights of the hair are. I tend to lean more into cross-hatching, so doing a whole bunch of lines in one direction, and then if I want something darker, a whole bunch of lines in the other direction. Then I'll do maybe up or down lines or horizontal lines, whatever I need and however many times I need in order to get things the darkness that I want them to be. At this stage, I'm also going to make the lines of the hair a little bit cleaner, so I'm going to make them darker around the edges, seal up any holes, maybe add some little wispy hairs in there. When it comes to shading the face, body, and clothes, I try to keep in mind where my source of light is, and this is something you can decide ahead of time. On this case, you'd have a lot of light coming from the left side of the character's face, so their shadow is more on the right, and I'll usually start off with a lot of these really light cross-hatching lines. In places of deep shadow, like where the chin overhangs over the neck, you can use cross-hatching, although I would oftentimes use just a block of black to imply that's a big, heavy, clean shadow. And if you find you're having a hard time getting your ink lines to be light, try holding your pen at a little bit more of an angle. The more up and down that you hold it, the less ability you're going to have to control the pressure that you're using. So a lot of times, even if you're pressing as light as you possibly can, it's still going to come out heavier than you want. Try putting your pen at an extreme angle and see where that takes you. So once you've got all of the shadows down that you want, everything's the right shade and it's all good, you're going to want to go over the lines again to make them all super clean and tidy. You want to darken your lines. And I know my handwriting is horrible. I'm sorry. So while you can just go over everything very tidily, I often find that making lines darker in areas where there would be more shadow, say like where the hair is overlapping the face or where the clothes are overlapping the body, if you make those areas thicker, you might find that your sketch looks a little more 3D, or at least that the line art looks a little more dynamic. I find this especially effective on clothing folds, so if you want to make sure that the shadow of a cloth folding over itself looks a little deeper, then like make that boy chunky. Make this little Nike swoosh a super swoosh, if you know what I'm saying. If you want to go super simple background on these things, you can try putting shading just off one side. That will imply that there's a light source on the opposite and that the shadow is sort of traveling behind this character. In this case, I'm not looking to do anything dynamic with the background, so I'm actually just going to put shading sort of around the character. This is a good overall way to make them look like they're popping off the page a little bit, bring them into the focus of attention. If you do have a thicker black ink pen or a lot of patience, I also find it's very dynamic to put a thicker outline around the character to make them really pop off the thing, make them look more prominent. And then if you do have that white gel pen, it's time for some highlights. So I'll usually put a little dot in each eye for that eye sparkle. I'll put some slicey lines across her hair for highlights to kind of show like where light might be hitting her hair and it looks super shiny. A little dab on the lips to make them look wet. And then in this case, I don't know, maybe she's got beads or something in her bun. So we're gonna put some little speckles in there and then maybe highlight the rose petals a touch. These things are all unnecessary. You can get a similar effect by just avoiding putting ink in those areas when you're initially inking the thing. But I find it's a good way to spruce up a drawing or correct any mistakes you might have. And then I've got my finished sketch. The only problem is I wrote all around it, so it looks crappy. So you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna take a photo with our phone, and then we're gonna open an editing program on a computer. I use Paint Tool Side, but you can do this on pretty much any editing program. I'm basically just boosting the brightness and contrast of the drawing. If it's scanned or the photo has come in with a lot of color one way or another, if there's like weird lighting in the room, bump the hue down to nothing, bump the saturation down to nothing, and you'll get a black and white clean drawing. And then I'm going to clean up all of my little doodles with a white eraser tool or pen tool. Do keep in mind that if you didn't take all of the color saturation out of the image, you're going to want to use an eyedropper tool to pick up whatever the white-ish background is, because it may not be pure white. You can also use selection tools, be it the square or the freeform, to rotate your image if you find it's on a weird tilt. And then once you're happy with everything, I often save it in a PNG form because I find those are best for online imaging. Anyway, that's pretty much the gist of it. I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I will do my very best to answer. And if you like this video, please let me know. Like, comment. You guys know the drill. Whatever. Everyone on YouTube says this stuff. And if you'd like, so subscribe. We'll see each other again in the future. Okay, bye!